Hello, everybody!
Turn this up in my headphones, Charles.
Turning it up. Hello, everybody, one and all. Welcome to yet another very exciting episode of the Friends Talking Fantasy Podcast. My name is Charles, and with me today, as always, is my lifelong friend and co-host, Dylan.
I'm ready to talk some fantasy with my friend, Charles.
I am ready to talk some fantasy with my friend as well, Dylan, and not just any fantasy today. Because today we are getting revved up, getting psyched up for our upcoming First Law book discussion of Best Serve Cold. That is right. Best Serve Cold. You heard me. We're reading Abercrombie again. This is part of our journey to get through the Age of Madness in time for the Wisdom of Crowds in September. So we are trudging along that journey. We are about to discuss Best Served Cold, but before we do that, we need to get back in the headspace of the First Law world, and we decided what better way than to have our very own First Law only Who Would Win.
Yeah, that's exactly what we are doing today. Much like Revenge, a Best Served Cold buddy read discussion episode is... Oh man, I'm going to say Best Served Cold. It didn't sound as good because I said the title. Anyway, point being, we are going to give that to you down the road, but right now we're just talking about these First Law characters from the original trilogy. And that means that if you've read through The Blade itself, Before They Are Hanged, and Last Argument of Kings, then you've read enough to not have to worry about any spoilers in this one. But if you have not yet read the First Law original trilogy, then now is a good time to turn this down in your headphones so that you don't get that trilogy spoiled for you. It's also a good time to go pick those books up because those are some of our absolute favorites. So with no further ado, Charles, shall we give a quick intro to what this First Law character matchup, Who Would Win style episode actually will be like, and then just get into these matchups?
Yeah, let's do it. So normally with Who Would Win, we draw on characters from all the books that we've buddy read along with other characters in popular culture, but this time around we're doing things a little bit differently. We have 26 different characters featured in the First Law trilogy put into our Who Would Win fantasy matchup generator, and
TM.
We have TM. Thank you. And we have all of our classic competitions. So this is a Who Would Win consisting entirely of First Law characters. And being able to get past the spoilers and get into spoiler territory, it's really going to open up the discussion for Who Would Win. And I think this is just going to be the way to do Who Would Win going forward. I'm super excited to give it a try.
Yeah.
Super excited.
Yeah, I'm with you, Charles. We've toyed with these Who Would Win formats quite a bit, and I like this one. I like the idea of being able to attend to a particular fan base and get into it without having to worry about not spoiling stuff. So, yeah, I've got these scenarios, things like fist fights, elections, cook-offs, even rap battles are in the mix, and I'll randomly select one using that generator technology while Charles randomly selects characters, and we'll just improvise who we think would win those matchups. Yeah, let's do it.
Well said. So let's get the first one going. Dylan, what competition are we going to lead off our First Law character matchups?
That's a great question. Let's get that generator pumping. Beep. Boop, beep. It is a cook-off. That is where we're starting here, Charles.
Oh, a cook-off. All right. So beep, boop, beep. Getting some names in the generator. All right. So we have two contenders here. Both are from the north. both named men.
Oh.
In one corner, he's campaigned with Logan Ninefingers quite a bit, and he is none other than Tol Duru Thunderhead.
Oh.
And in the other corner, you might see him eyeing down Logan from the side every once in a while. Not sure what side he's going to land on. That's none other than... did it just get a little chilly in here? Nah, it's just Carl Shivers.
Yeah, good old Shivers in the mix. I thought for a second you might be going Black Dow with the eyeing up Logan. But
no.
Shivers makes a lot of sense there too. And... he gets he's an interesting character. I think that I'm trying to just take a step back and think about if there's any sort of canon we have to go off of with Tol Duru and Shivers. I think both being from the north, we get the sense that they're street smart, really. Right. They're out there. They probably both of them really know how to cook from a survivalist perspective as two named, seasoned folks. I don't think I remember either of them necessarily showing their cooking skills. Logan obviously shows his cooking skills, but I don't know about these two.
I was going to say the only Northman that I know that has anything related to canon about cooking is Logan Ninefingers with his good old cook pot that... the only cook pot I ever shed a tear for was poor
You didn't
Logan.
shed a tear, Charles. Let's be honest.
I felt very bad for that poor cook pot. It deserved better, but
it did deserve better.
But that is the only canon cooking that I can remember for any of these Northmen. Yeah, I'm kind of leaning towards look, maybe Thunderhead picked up some stuff traveling with Logan and that cook pot for a while, so why not give it to him? Unless there was anything that we could pull from Carl Shivers, but I don't know if there is.
There's nothing that comes to mind for me about Shivers and cooking, at least to this point in the series, and I think that you got to give it to the more seasoned veteran in Tol Duru then. So, I think that experience wins out here.
I would agree. I picture this cookout being like an encampment before a battle or something. They've all got their little tents out in the woods, and they've got the two different cook pots going over the fire, and they're competing over who's gonna cook the better gruel for the army, and everyone's kind of giving them a hard time. I mean, I feel like armies eat almost exclusively gruel on the roads. It can't be that great.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty tough sitch if it's down to who is making the better gruel, but I see how it gets to that point. I think that. Yeah, I think they'd be able to scrounge something together, but they're probably both used to this more how can I make something edible when we don't have a lot of supplies than they are really putting on those garnishings and making anything so great in a cook-off. So I get where you're going with the gruel.
And then when you take these two characters out of their comfort zones, Tol Duru seems like a really level-headed guy, and Shivers seems like he could get kind of caught up in his own emotions or he'd start doubting himself a little bit. So I can see him getting a little more psyched out. I see Black Dows talking smack, from the sidelines, and Shivers is getting all perturbed and maybe putting a little bit too much spice or something in the gruel, and Tol Duru's level head and experience gives him the edge on this one. And,
I think Tol Duru has so much confidence and bravado. I think that, I think we have a winner here, Charles. Let's get on to another matchup because I think the next one will be interesting. So I'm going to get that generated. Not to say that last one wasn't, but let's be honest. A cook-off between Tol Duru and Shivers wasn't exactly what you and I imagined when we put this together. But anyway, Charles, I think the next one will be interesting because after I ran the generator, the sound effects weren't working there. I got three-legged race, Charles. So let's see.
Okay.
That
so
means you're going to pick two
teams
of two. Yes. And Charles, you'll do a masterful job, as you always do, explaining what a three-legged race is.
All right. Well, a three-legged race is when you have two people standing side by side. The legs that are against each other are tied together, and you try and run a race against other people tied up in a similar way. And our first matchup, man, I feel for this duo here. On one end, we've got this first duo consists of a Northman and a non-Northman.
Okay.
The Northmen being perhaps
two types of people in this world.
Yeah, pretty much. This Northman happens to be one of the few who is able to go, shoulder to shoulder with Logan Nine Fingers, and that is Rudd Three Trees.
Oh,
so
yes.
Very
fantastic
admirable
leader.
Running opponent. And then tied with him in this race is, there's no other way to say it. It's the first of the Magi. It's Baez.
Oh, wow. This is not his first time in a three-legged race in one of these Who Would Win episodes.
No.
So.
And then on the other corner, we have another Northman. This time, I would say it is, one of the most famous Northmen in First Law. If you were to count his fingers, Dylan, I'd say you only count 9. Logan Nine Fingers himself. In the mix. And tied up with him is one of the few female characters that we get in the First Law, and it happens to be one that I think always steals the show with every scene that she's in. And this character is Artie.
I thought you were going Artie when you said steals the show. She's fantastic. It's an interesting matchup. And we do get a scene between Artie and Logan. And if I'm remembering correctly, they kind of like sit down next to each other and have this almost like fish out of water. They like relate to each other in a way that Artie seems to struggle to find people to relate to her, but Logan has that almost level head. Sometimes he doesn't, but when he's just interacting with people in a non-combat situation, he's so personable. So I think those two would have good chemistry based on their interaction, and that's an important part of a three-legged race.
Yeah, being in sync is important, and Artie, I believe, has this ability to enter a conversation with someone at their level and be comfortable there. She can talk to anybody and can always make it fun. And always like the person talking to her is always just kind of ends the conversation being like, what just happened?
Yeah, they're a little on their back foot the whole time. Yes, exactly.
Yeah. I don't know if we've ever had a canon moment between Three Trees and Baez, though.
No, that would be interesting. It's probably, you could make the case for Three Trees as one of the most noble, if not the most noble character in terms of his just having a code and trying to do the right thing and really following through in these really bad situations, like making the best out of really awful circumstances. And I think that he's tied up with probably the worst person in the entire trilogy, just an absolute maniacal villain in Baez. And it's so nice to be able to say that on one of these Who Would Win episodes, just call Baez what he is.
And now, what I can say now also is what comes to my mind when I'm trying to pick who would win here is never bet against the Magi.
Never bet against a Magi.
Never. Baez isn't going to lose to anybody for anything. I just don't see it happening.
Oh, yeah. What we have seen is that when it came to the contest, Baez was able to use some sort of his craft to be able to completely cheat on behalf of Jazal, unwittingly for Jazal, who had no idea what was going on. And you have to think, poor Jazal, you have to think that no matter how good in sync Artie and Logan are during that race. Baez, if he's able to cheat to make Giselle artificially even better at fencing to be able to defeat someone like Bremer Dan Gorst, then you have to think that Baez would be able to use that same kind of craft to get him and someone as athletic, even if he's probably a little past his prime, Road 3 Trees, still very athletic dude, to get them to the point where they could win this. Yeah, Charles, you and I, if we've learned one thing, like you said, say one thing for you and I, Charles, we would never bet against the Mages.
Oh, never,
and
never.
We won't here. Yeah.
Certainly not. I'm happy there. I think we did it.
Yeah. Sorry, Logan getting ousted.
Sorry, Logan. Yeah, Logan and Baez, two big names in that one.
Yeah. All right. Shall we get the next one pumping?
Let's do it.
All right. Beep, boop, beep. We've got a rap battle here, Charles. I'm excited to see which First Law characters. Oh, okay. I'm glad.
Oh my God, this
that.
is going to be the worst rap battle in history.
Oh no. And that we had me against Boromir in another episode. This is worse.
This is going to be like, how would this situation even happen? Because, okay, on one hand, you have another magical being, but it's not Baez.
Is it Karib?
Yes.
It's witch?
Karib the witch. And now
I was like, there aren't a lot of magical beings. Why is she rapping?
Now, Dylan, if you had to pick a character from the First Law who's probably least capable of rapping, I think this character would come to your mind very quickly if you thought about it.
Oh, Harding Grimm? Is it Harding Grimm?
Oh, that would have been great, but this is maybe second after Harding Grimm.
And Harding Grimm, I actually kind of feel like it could be one of those moments with him where it's like, this guy, there's no way he can rap. Like, he's just going to step up here and, like, he never even says anything. And then he would just drop a huge verse and smoke whoever he's going against. Because there's, like, that eulogy
I can
moment.
see that coming. If it was Karib and Grimm, I would have voted for Grimm.
Me too.
Because he has those moments.
Be the scenario.
He doesn't speak unless it's prudent, and then he drops mad bombs, which is why I would have voted for Grimm. But it's not Grimm. This person is Grimm in many ways, though. You might find him, in the underground helping Glokta execute interrogations as a practical.
Oh, no, practical Frost.
Yes, practical Frost.
No.
Which I don't know if, for all you audiobook listeners out there, Stephen Pacey's voice for Frost is like, Frost barely speaks. He's like, I don't know, it's just me going around. I'm Frost. Like Frost barely speaks. He only parrots Glokta's like the last word in Glokta's sentence. It's like it would make you very uncomfortable. Uncomfortable.
It's gotta be Karib. Yeah, it's gotta be Karib.
Yeah,
I mean,
it can't be.
It would be hilarious to try to watch Frost rap. But yeah, he's definite. I think you're right in saying he's the most ill-equipped of any character to actually drop some serious rhymes here. So, yep.
Right.
I think it's got to be Karib because she's almost got a mellifluous way of speaking, especially the way that Pacey performs her in the audiobook.
It's true.
So she's kind of got this timbre to her voice. And I don't know, she'd probably put everyone in a trance where they think she's doing amazing. And she probably wouldn't even have to do that because Frost would be so bad. So yeah, I think it's not even close.
I would agree completely. If Frost can't win this, it's just not possible.
All right. Well, it sounds like we're in agreement there. Shall we get it pumping again?
Let's get it pumping.
All right. Charles, I'm glad to see a battle royale with 4 people. You're going to pick 4 people here, Charles.
All right. Well, let's get the first person out here. And this person is one of our POV characters. And it is also one that we had we have done a character study on very recently.
Ooh.
This is someone who is always on the search for vengeance, someone who has a bit of demon blood in her, someone who's never backing down from a fight, and that is Pharaoh Malgin. On the other hand,
she's going to be a tough out here.
She's going to be a tough one to beat. And I do not envy this person's position. They are Northmen themselves. They have ridden along with some of the greats: Logan Nine Fingers, Tall Duru, Thunderhead, Rudd Three Trees, named men all. But this one is named for bit of a different reason, and perhaps might be in a bit of trouble this time around. And that is Forley the Weakest.
Oh no, not Forley the Weakest.
So he's gonna have a hard time in a battle royale situation.
That's a tough sitch for Forley here.
Yeah,
he's always getting the bad end of the stick here.
That's absolutely correct. This is another female character who's not one to back down from a fight, has a very tough exterior, always ready to hold up her own and defend herself and her well-being, and that is Shiloh Vitari, Practical Vitari, who is a pretty formidable fighter herself.
Yeah.
And then we have a strategic, I don't know, mastermind might be generous, but he is definitely at one point the Lord Marshal of the Army of the Union. But perhaps
mastermind's generous.
But perhaps his greatest enemy was his damn indigestion.
Yeah.
And that's Lord Marshal Burr.
Oh my God.
So to recap, we have Pharaoh, Weakest, Lord Marshal Burr, and Vitari.
You didn't even call him Forley.
Forley the Weakest.
Just like Weakest.
Yes. So this, I mean, obviously Burr and Forley are gone instantly.
It's a tough sitch.
And then it's Vitari and Pharaoh.
You get I'm trying to think if Burr has some sort of history, maybe even winning the contest. Sorry if I'm wrong about that one, but like some sort of history of being a good fighter. But he is at this point in his career where the indigestion's just keeping him down.
Damn this indigestion.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's a tough one, I think. And what's interesting to think about is Pharaoh might actually show some mercy on a Forley type. Even though we talked about this a lot in our character profile of Pharaoh, is she's always talking and thinking to herself about how she's down to kill people and she doesn't care about people and all this kind of stuff. But deep down, when pressed with someone helpless, like when she had Glokta helpless and at her mercy, she let him go. And same thing with Severard. So I don't think Pharaoh actually would have it in her to kill Forley unless she saw him as an actual threat to her life.
Meanwhile, Vitari would have no problem killing Forley the Weakest.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, this is a battle royale.
Yeah.
Let's do what we can to survive.
A good voice. Yeah, that Pacey would be proud, I think.
Well, it's all what I get from listening to Pacey, which is how I most enjoy experiencing Abercrombie's work here in the First Law series. So, Vitari has like an edge to her voice when Stephen Pacey does her. So, Vitari would have no problem like throwing a dagger or a shuriken or whatever they use as projectiles, as practicals at Forley the Weakest and killing him right away. Burr would be like hiding in a corner somewhere being like, damn this indigestion. I would be defeating Vitari if it wasn't for my indigestion.
Yeah. So I'm trying to think how this plays out. I think Pharaoh probably wouldn't have issue killing someone like Burr, so she might just put an arrow through him at the start. Honestly, she's great with the bow.
She's
fantastic.
I think with the bow.
Yeah. So unfortunately for Burr, and at this point, it's probably out of his misery. Let's be honest, with his damned indigestion. So he's out, and then we're in this situation. I think where we've got Forley just like trying not to piss himself, surrounded by Vitari and Pharaoh. And I feel like Vitari wouldn't want to spend... Yeah, you don't want to be in Forley's shoes here. But Vitari probably wouldn't want to spend her time... She'd like choke out. That's kind of her way of doing it with... Is it like a whip or something that she has? Where she like chokes people out? She does it to Carla at one point.
She uses several different methods. I can't remember what she used on Carla, but it was kind of like a wire or a whip situation.
Her. Yeah, wire. Yeah, something like that. Something to choke her. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, but I feel like she wouldn't want to spend the time like focused on Forley because as soon as she did that, Pharaoh would go after her. So I don't know. What do you think happens when it's down to those three?
I mean, it's tough because both Pharaoh and Vitari actually were able to like hold their own and survive in a skirmish with Logan Nine Fingers. So they're both proven warriors, and Vitari's, I believe it's a cross-shaped blade on a chain.
Gotcha.
Is her weapon of choice. And Archlector Salt describes her as being colder than snow. So there you go. She is tough. She's
a survivor too.
Yeah, that's the thing. Yeah. But so is Pharaoh, and I think it just comes down to this demon blood element to it that gives Pharaoh an edge. But Vitari is, I think, more cold and Machiavellian in her decision choices than Pharaoh is, which in certain simulations might give her the edge, but I think more often than not, you got to give it to Pharaoh.
I think so too. Vitari is interesting through the lens of someone who wants to. I think the way I differentiate them with the like survivalist thing is like Pharaoh, I feel like would be kind of fine just throwing herself in the mix, and if she dies, she dies. Like, but Vitari has more to live for. She has, she's a mother.
That's true.
And that's a big thing that it's not, she's one of those characters I think is a very interesting depiction of a mother. We've talked about these before with characters like Alana from Saga, Charles, that you like. Alana's just like a mother where that's just part of who she is, and it of course dictates her motivations, but it's not by any means the only thing that defines her.
Right.
But I think she'd be doing whatever she could to get out of this alive. And even if it took, like, because she's begged before to, like, Glocta and things like that, I think she'd be willing to even forfeit before being killed if it came to that. While Pharaoh would not forfeit.
Forfeiting was an option in a battle royale. But
so you're just like, no. Okay. I'll give it to Pharaoh. I mean, I don't know about...
I think there's certain scenarios, like in like Marvel or Doctor Strange, it's like there's all these situations and we win in only one. Or it's like, okay, there's some situations in which Vitari would win. There's some multiverses out there, but I feel like most of them are going to Pharaoh, and that's really,
I agree.
And I really just think she just has these supernatural abilities about her. She has enhanced vision. She doesn't feel pain. She's got a lot of stamina. She, all of these things that would give her a huge edge in a combat battle royale situation where even if as formidable of a warrior as Vitari is, they just can't stand sometimes. Like Vitari's only hope is to outmaneuver Pharaoh quickly. That's really her only hope. And Pharaoh's not really the kind of person to let
very
that
quick,
happen.
so yeah. No, I give it to Pharaoh. It would be interesting to see if Pharaoh had it in her to end Forley the weakest after that, but yeah, that's neither here nor there. She would be the odds-on favorite to win in the battle royale.
Yes, fair. All right.
Yeah.
Shall we get the next scenario going? Beep boop beep.
Yeah, I'll get that pump in. Beep, boop, beep. It's an election, Charles.
Oh.
And we know we have seen actual elections in the First Law. We'll see who's involved in this one.
And one of these characters has actually won I guess what you would consider an election. This is someone who, when it came time to choose a new chief, it could only be him.
Not quite an election.
Not quite an election. It couldn't be Black Dow. It couldn't be Thunderhead. It had to be the Dog Man.
Yeah.
Yeah, man of the people.
Don't want to do him dirty.
You don't want to do him dirty. Not by any means. Then on the other side, you have someone who you might not always think of as a leader. This is someone who spent most of his time getting carried by others, literally, and serving under others, literally, and ultimately was eaten and their body was occupied by someone else. And this is Malachus Kwai.
It's got to be the Dog Man.
It's got to be.
There's just nothing about Malachus Kwai that would make anyone want to vote for
Kwai for it.
Yeah. What are you seeing in Kwai? He's not even good at being an apprentice. I feel like when he is alive and it has not been eaten yet, it's just like he's getting all the plants wrong when Baez is asking him stuff. And it's like, this is a guy who's not even prepared to answer questions that are relevant to his role. What about when they start asking about foreign policy? It's like, this guy's not going to know what's going on. The Dog Man, at least, but Kwai, the thing about Kwai too is he I feel like would try to pretend he knows, and then you end up looking worse than the Dog Man who just be like, let's be level with you here. I don't know what's going on, but I'll try really hard. And I'll do my best, and the people love him. He won an election of sorts for us, Charles, on Twitter.
It's true, he did.
So,
and that was over people. Like Chazal and Pharaoh and Wes. He beat them all. And
when we put that Twitter poll up, the Dog Man took 45% of the vote when there were 4 options, and one of them was Jazal, who gets way more page time.
Yes.
And it's got to go Dog Man. He's such a likable guy.
Yeah. He's a man of the people. He's very likable. Ideal candidate for an election too. And election's important. It's not like most likely to overthrow a government and become a dictator. It's like, no, this is most likely to be voted by his peers.
Yeah.
And I can't think of someone that embodies that more in the first law than the Dog Man.
Well said, Charles. Let's get the generator. Malachus Kwai.
Not a lot of contests he's winning.
Kwai it's like the only time Kwai would have a chance is against Forley the weakest. It's like,
or maybe against Frost in a rap battle.
I think he would probably beat Frost in a rap battle. Okay, Charles, here we've got a serious one with a duel with weapons. Well, it could be serious assuming we have
This is very serious. This is deadly serious because we have 2 hardened warriors that are leaders of men and also just the toughest guys around. And the first one was the first to crown himself the king of the north. We have Bethod.
Oh, well, Bethod's not a great fighter. There's a reason Logan was doing his fighting for him. But he is a leader of men. That's an election candidate for sure. But let's see who's he up against.
I think the Dog Man's more electable than Bethod's kind of scary.
That's neither here nor there, but...
Anyway, we're talking about a fight with weapons, and you bring up a good point, Dylan, because this character is a proven fighter who did go toe-to-toe with Logan. He may have lost, but you know what? You could say he won in the end, and that is Black Dow.
Oh, Black Dow would wreck Bethod, Charles. It's a shame for...
Wow. Yeah. I mean, I would give it to Black Dow too, but I don't know if I would have made it as definitive.
What evidence do you have of Bethod being a good fighter? I think it's I think it's explicitly said at times that Bethod is not a fighter. He's a thinker basically. And even if it's not explicitly said, which I do think it is, there's just no there's nothing to draw from with Bethod being a fighter.
Yes,
Logan did all his
difference,
fighting for him.
I like
And
to
Black
think that it's
Dow
because
is a
I
great
think
fighter.
Bethod was an imposing figure, and his sons are imposing figures as well.
Well, scale
but he
is.
just chose to, what's it called? Let other people fight for him. He chose to delegate that responsibility because he's the king. Which you can put some respect on. But yeah, you're right. Black Dow is such a proven fighter, and he's a really deadly guy. So I wouldn't want to go against him in a fight with weapons. There's very few people that could take Black Dow. So,
and if nothing else, Charles, what we can draw from is the fact that Logan, even bloody and battered from his encounter with Fenris the Feared, while Bethod was yelling at him, like Logan just walked up and smashed Bethod's head in with no resistance. Like if this guy was actual fighter and was fresh while Logan was all just messed up from this fight, then Bethod would have had a shot to actually resist. Right. And Black Dow from his fight with Logan, which is backstory, really put up a great fight against Logan. So yeah, I think it's not even close.
Black Dow it is. I agree.
Yeah, not a lot can compete with him. So,
no, definitely not.
Yeah. Let's get that generator pumping again. Beep, boop, beep. And we have chess, Charles. A chess match here.
Oh, see, this one is kind of interesting.
Okay.
We have two clever minds entering the arena today for this chess match. On one hand, he's been all over the world. He's had his fingers in all kinds of adventures, often on both sides. I'm talking about the famed soldier of fortune, Nicomo Casca. And
yes,
on the other side, this is a proven tacticianer, a proven user of logic and manipulation and political intrigue. He worked his way up from practical to basically the will of Baez. I am talking about Glokta.
Oh, wow. Okay, well, early favorite in chess for just about anyone except maybe Baez would probably be the number one chess player of all of it, but next up is probably Glokta. So he's my early favorite here, but Casca I think would have some flourish. He'd underplay his he'd make Glokta think he didn't know the rules. He would be acting like he's all drunk, but we don't know how drunk he actually is or is. You just have no idea what is coming when you're going up against Nicomo Casca in anything. The man is unpredictable from the outside, and it would be he'd be so funny, dude. He's so great.
Yeah, this would be a fun little scene here of the two of these people sharing ideals over a chess match, and I could see it ending where Casca sneakily gets the checkmate on his way out, And he's like, oh, by the way, checkmate. And Glokta's like, what? Yes. And now if you excuse me, I'll have to take a piss. That's how I see it going,
I could see that too. Yeah, no, I imagine this idea that it's I could imagine the two of them sitting down in some sort of interaction and they had a lot of these interactions, not over a chessboard, but an interaction where Glokta's like, I need you on my side, I'll pay you more, this kind of stuff. And they're having these musings, and Casca loves to wax philosophical about his his theories about honor and all this kind of stuff. And we know what Casca thinks of honor. It doesn't have a lot of worth to him. And all this kind of stuff. And it's kind of you'd be in Glokta's POV, and he's kind of not actually thinking about the chess match. He's thinking about trying to get Casca to his side, and he thinks Casca isn't thinking about the chess match either. It's just something to play around with while they're talking, and Glokta's trying to bring him over to his side, and then we get that sneaky moment where it's and he thinks Casca's just so drunk that he's not even knowing what he's doing. But we get that moment where Casca gives that checkmate and then explains to Glocta that he like pulled some move that he'd read, like he'd read up on in some sort of like strategy. I mean, because he's
like
well read.
Someone showed him in a faraway land, you know. It's
or
like,
who knows?
oh,
Yeah,
I met the person who invented this move
yes.
at dinner in Syria. Like you're like, what?
And he's like, yeah,
I don't know if that's true or not,
Charles.
But okay.
Yes, but either way, he's been checkmated, and that's what matters. Yeah, Casca, don't underestimate him. That's
I would say they're
thing.
two of the like most clever minds in the First Law, and Casca is someone who is willing to play into a narrative just to big brain strategy something else, and he always kind of ends up on top, and he always has like a good sense of humor about it to the point where you can never tell like who this guy is. So I don't know, I'm in a good mood today with Casca. I want Casca to win is where I think I'm coming from
that Doctor Strange perspective. I think it's like 80% of the time you would think Glocta probably wins, but I think because I'm so entertained by that idea you posed of him kind of like checkmating him and then like being like, well, gotta go take a piss type thing is I just love that so much. And I'll say that we're picking that this is one of those 20% times where Casca wins it in this kind of pretending to be less than he is fashion and tricking Glocta, just because it'd be so funny to watch that scene play out. And Glocta hates losing. So he'd be so frustrated and being in his point of view for it would be great.
Glocta is like a mastermind in a lot of ways, so you'd think he just is like one of the best chess players in the First Law, and if he was going to lose to somebody, this would be the most entertaining of all of his defeats. It would be with Casca. So I'm willing to believe we live in the multiverse in which Casca defeats Glocta.
Yes, I'm willing to believe it too because I want to.
Exactly,
and that's
it's our show.
It's our show. We can pick whatever we want. Yeah. So, yeah, you're welcome to disagree because you're probably right. But but like in true Casca spirit, we're not going to let the truth get in the way of a good story.
That's
and
right.
A good story is one where Casca pulls out the W.
Well said. Should we do a couple more? One more? Let's see how we go. Let's see how we're feeling.
Sure. Yeah, let's see what happens.
All right, let's keep it rolling.
All right. We've got a podcast duo, Charles.
Oh, this is exciting.
Yes, we're going to pick two groups of two and see who we... Oh, no, Charles.
I picked them already. I don't know if I would give either of these a listen, but
oh no,
we're gonna try anyway. So the first podcast, we have a duo who both are from the Union. They both had participated in the tournament at one stage or another. The contest, yes, thank you. The contest at one stage or another. The first being Colum West himself, POV character, rising up the ranks all the way to the Lord Marshal status. And then on the other end, we have Bremer den Gorst, Bremer den Gorst, thank you, who went up against Giselle in the tournament and for all intents and purposes should have won were it not for Baez's magical interference.
Not a number one choice for podcaster. No. Bremer den doesn't have the voice for it, first off.
I mean, in canon, his voice is like uncharacteristically high-pitched and squeaky.
Yes. And... yeah, that's a tough one.
I guess in this podcast, they would just both complain about Giselle the whole time.
But the funny thing is that Bremer, I mean, you remember what happened with Bremer after he lost? He just like lifted Giselle into the air. And he was a good sport. Yes, he was a good sport. I mean, internally, we don't know at this point what might or might not have been going on for him. But... I'll say that he seems to be externally able to put on this, like, I'm a good sport about it. So I don't think he'd really be up for complaining about the King of the Union. And Colin probably wouldn't. Colin doesn't hold back, especially when he gets furious. But
that's true. But let's get into our other duo now. What's interesting about this duo is they're kind of like the followers, but when they do speak, it kind of catches you by surprise. The first being...
Don't tell me Harding Grimm is in...
How did you know?
And Gorst. See, this is why it's a bummer. Or sometimes doing the random, and sometimes it's great because we get Glockta against Casca, and chess is fantastic. But now we have Harding Grimm
as
the
a
Grimcast.
Yeah. And then his co-host is one who has served with Frost and has served with Glockta well. If you were to, the one thing that he was worrying about when he was going up against Pharaoh was his birds, and is Severard and Grimm together as a podcast.
Severard is an interesting character in some ways. He's got a silver tongue, you can kind of tell. He knows how to talk. He's kind of slick.
Yeah, he's a bit entrepreneurial. He likes birds.
that we're aware of. Yeah, I mean, Grimm, I don't know. Who knows? Because Grimm's so good at rising to the occasion, like we've said. Like, oh, you've got to give a eulogy? He's going to kill it.
Yeah.
And then maybe he's the kind of guy where if it's like he really wanted to do a podcast and he was committed to it, you put the mic in front of him and you're like, this guy has so many interesting things to say.
That's true. For me, like, who would I want to hear from more? It's like, I got to hear what Grimm has to say.
I agree.
I'm sure like 99% of the podcast ever would be like, don't you just love birds? And Grimm would be like,
dude, you're over it.
But then
that's true.
But then
not the bird. I think you overestimate Severard's like desire to talk about his birds.
The
like
bird
he doesn't
moment
talk.
just is a standout for me for Severard.
It is.
So you can't forget.
But part of why it's a standout is that it comes out of nowhere because he hadn't been talking about his birds, and it's kind of this like, it's an interesting moment of like what keeps people going and how do people find purpose. It's like Severard this whole time, like the thing that has kept him going is his birds, and there's a reason to live is his birds. So it's this interesting moment, but I think that those are like for him. It's like that's his own little thing. He doesn't want to share that with the world. He'd be talking about he'd be one of those podcasters that's like telling you how you can get rich quick and things like that. That's what he'd want to talk about. And yeah, you're right. Grimm would just be like grunting a lot of the time. But when Grimm talks, we listen.
We're listening. That's right. And then on the other hand, I feel like Colin West is way too buttoned up to be able to put on a show. You know, I think he's too concerned about his image and his station. Like, how would this affect my job in the army?
Yeah,
that he wouldn't be able to loosen up enough to let the conversation flow. And it's like you said, Gorst Cannon, not a voice that you would like think would be well suited for podcasting.
Here's what I'm thinking, Charles.
Mm-hmm.
A big part of podcasting is figuring out what your niche is and what you can offer, I think. And the benefit of the Gorst and West cast is that they could just make it about fencing. They could just make it about, like, here's how you train for the contest. We're two people who, one of us is a finalist, even though, like, Gorst was better than West ever was, I would bet, by a long shot, based on some information we have.
So it'd be literally just, so they had to get his competitor on the show.
Exactly. So then it's like literally like I think you and I think about podcasts a lot of times as we're just trying to like entertain and have fun. And that's not what we'd necessarily think about with Gorst and West. But those two would have a lot of knowledge to offer for these young training fighters who want to
true.
enter the contest. And I think they'd have to be the better podcast duo because that would actually be a very successful podcast in the union, I think.
I think you nailed it. I hadn't considered that, but you're 100% right. These two are perfectly suited for a podcast about the contest and sword fighting, and everyone loves the contest. Everyone would tune in to get their perspectives, and they could even do like a broadcast of the contest, and they could narrate it, you know. They
commentators.
They could be commentators, exactly right.
I'm liking this.
Yeah, it's like, who are you liking for the next contest, Gorst? Well, I'm liking this guy because he's got a really heavy swords, and I think that's great. It's because he's canon, got a high voice, and most would be like, I agree. And you know what? His voice might be unusual, but sometimes that can give you the edge. It helps you stand out. It's like, oh, that voice is very unique. It's very Gorst. Yeah.
We got a compliment from the great Sandra Gibbons, booktuber extraordinaire on Twitter today that called our voices distinct, Charles.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I told her it was probably the first time anyone's ever complimented my voice.
I mean,
she's very nice.
Yeah, that was a very nice thing to say. We appreciate that. Distinct.
Yeah. Yes, distinct. She meant it as a no, she said like that. She said something more explicitly a compliment as well. And yes, thank you, Sandra.
Thank you, Sandra.
Yeah, some people
I would
don't
say,
have the
Gorst's voice is distinct.
Gorst's voice distinct.
Mm-hmm.
Like
I think that's great. And although I would really want to listen to what Hard and Grim has to say, I think you got to like that 90% dead air. Plus the fact that these two don't have this common interest, and this niche is just so good because people love the contest. I'd back that horse. I'm willing to go Gorst West. You convinced me.
Yeah, it's got to be them. You got a name idea, Charles?
Let's think for a second. Name idea. You have Bremer, Dan Gorst, and Colin.
It could be like, you know, they're always saying that West is first through the breach. That's like the big first through the breach of Ulriach. Could be like the like through the breach with Colin West. I don't know, but it doesn't give Gorst his due. But I don't know.
Right.
Something with the contest.
Could just call it. I mean, West might get like really just generic name like Contest Commentary Podcast, the CCP, or something like that, or like Contest Theory or something like that.
Yeah, they probably
like
would
something
just go
not
dry.
exciting. Something like very deliberate, like welcome to
like Friends Talking Fantasy.
Yeah, Friends Talking Fencing, FTF.
Oh yes, nailed it, Charles. I love it.
Yeah, that would be the
Friends Talking Fencing.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. Well done, Charles.
Thank you.
I would be clapping if it wouldn't sound weird in the microphone.
Thank you.
I'm proud of you for that one.
Thank
FTF,
you.
Friends
FTF.
Talking Fencing.
I'm glad that we got there with the thought process of like, it would be the most uninspired, boring thing ever, like our show.
Like our name. Every time we come up with this podcast duo thing, it becomes like, what's a good name? Well, our name sucks. Yeah. At least it's descriptive.
Yeah.
You know what we are.
Yeah, exactly. And you'll know what this show is. It's Friends Talking Fencing. I'd tune in, get some tips.
Yeah, I would tune in. Well, I don't know but it would find its audience, and that's what matters.
Yeah, it could be a show kind of like Writing Fighting with Christian Cameron, where he does the sword. He does like the sword techniques and everything like that. Christian Cameron, fantasy author, who also goes onto YouTube to demonstrate sword techniques That could be something that they do, and they could be sparring partners. Like, this technique was used in the contest 2 years ago against this character. This is how we won, and how he won, and like do the demonstration. Like, that could be fun.
Yes, those are always really fun to watch, and yeah, the fantasy fans probably know him under the pen name Miles Cameron. He did like the Red Knight and stuff. So but Christian Cameron making those amazing writing fighting videos, and you can check those out on Twitter he's at Phokion1 with a PHOKION1, and they're really cool.
Yeah, I like them because they're like they're short, and they're techniques that I had never considered. Like, I never thought to grab the sword like with your hands. That's like a very common technique. I was like, ew, I never thought to like.
You didn't learn from Lan? Sometimes you have to sheathe the sword, Charles.
Well, that's different than sheathing the sword. Running it through your own body is different from just grabbing it when it's close to you and keep moving it out of the way, which makes a whole lot of sense. So yes. I don't think Christian Cameron would be a proponent of the sheathing the sword movement.
Yes, well, if it's in an actual sheath, I think he would be okay with it. But he knows his stuff. I don't think he'd be telling anyone to stab themselves with the sword. So, yeah, I've yet to see that video, and I don't think it's coming anytime soon. But if you do want to learn how to write fighting or like watch these awesome videos,
like watch real techniques that aren't stabbing yourself, check out Writing Fighting.
I can't stop taking your shots at Lan from real time over there, Charles.
I know. And right after Sandra complimented us and everything,
I know. She says something nice, and then you attack one of her favorite characters.
Nothing wrong with Lan, okay? You brought it up, not me.
That is true. Well, now that we've officially gone off the rails, I think that ending on the Friends Talking Fencing podcast duo victory with Colin West and Bremerdan Gorst is, I don't think we can go up from there. So
Gorst being like, hello, everybody.
I don't think Colin would be down to engage in the silliness that I'm doing. Or really, Bremer would be playing it straight with that.
Yeah, Wes would be like, turn that down in my headphones. That's too loud.
It's too loud. Yeah.
Be like, hello, everybody.
We're here.
Welcome to another very exciting episode of the Friends Talking Fencing podcast.
Would not call it very exciting. There's no way. It would just be an episode of the Friends Talking Fencing podcast. Like, I'm ready to talk some fencing with my friend. It's like, okay.
And Gorst would start getting on his nerves a little bit and would be like, can you just stop for 2 seconds so we can talk about fencing, please?
It's like, your voice is annoying me. I'm trying to talk fencing here, and you're over there squeaking. It's like, oh, God. Don't go furious on us here, Colin.
I know the train wreck, but that's like the drama of it would be.
That's gold.
That's gold. Right. It's like, Wes is having one of his fits.
Yeah.
I think Gorst would be a good sport about it, like sometimes getting him riled up on purpose and stuff like that.
I don't think he would do that. I don't think he has the... who knows? Who knows what Gorst would do?
We don't know much about Gorst.
Not to this point, Charles.
Oh, he comes back? Well...
I don't want to spoil it. I don't know what counts as a spoiler or what doesn't. So I'm just trying to be super cryptic. Charles, you haven't read. You'll be my guide as to if you feel anything is spoiled. But I think I feel safe by saying we're
not done with Gorst.
Yeah. Well, yes, he's. He ends the trilogy still alive, and you might not. And he's Jazal's bodyguard, I believe, at the time of the end of the trilogy. So you might not be surprised if at some point Gorst does come up again. So I don't know. I'll talk to you off the air, Charles, about what does or doesn't count as a spoiler in the future about this.
Well, that's interesting. Potentially more Gorst canon in the future to look forward to. And I'm excited for that. But in the meantime, I think like you said, this show's gotten a little bit off the rails.
Yes.
But I'm happy with ending it on the Friends Talking Fencing podcast.
Yeah,
I think
like
that's
that.
great. And I think we've done it. Shout out to Giselle Dan Luther, the one character that didn't make it from our...
Wait, literally? Like every other character?
No, there's 4 characters from our list that didn't make it, but the others are Fenris the Feared, Carla Den Eider, and Prince Ladislav. Now, Giselle and Prince Ladislav together, that would be an interesting duo.
A podcast?
Yeah.
It depends like which point in the series Giselle...
Yeah, I think it's Giselle would start to... He would be to Prince Ladislav what like Logan is to Giselle, you know? He'd be the one that was like, you know, in my experience, it's best to be a little more humble about these things. And Ladislav is like, who is this weirdo? Why is he talking to me? Like, you know, like the full circle thing. But it's a bit disconnect. Like, it's the blind leading the blind this time, though. Or, you know, it could be funny. But
I could see that. I was thinking... If it was near the start of the series, they could talk about like fashion trends in the Union, just something very fluff.
Oh yeah, like who has the best like chin rankings of all the noblemen?
Oh my god. Yeah,
something like that.
They would be down to do that, although it'd be tough because they'd both probably be thinking themselves first.
Right, they'd probably be like, not counting us because we have the best chins. So
I don't think they would want to be excluded in that conversation. I think they would want to be front and center, especially Giselle.
Yeah, so it would just be them complimenting their own chins for an hour. Yes.
I think it'd probably devolve into an argument between the two of them as to which of them has the better chin. And everyone else would probably be irrelevant to the conversation as far as they go.
But people would still download it because royalty, and it's like this failing upwards thing that Abercrombie likes to write sometimes. So I could see that.
Yes. And I think people, that's the thing. If it was early on and it was like fashion trends in the Union, people would want to know what Prince Ladislav and Giselle Dan Luther are talking about when it comes to those fashion trends.
I mean,
especially after Giselle won the contest
alone. Yeah, you have a prince and a contest winner. Oh, I mean, come on. That's as fancy as it gets.
Yeah. Okay, well, I think I'm just going to, before we get distracted by some other First Law character matchup we just make up at this point. We don't even need the generator anymore, Charles. We're just going. So let's get that sweet, sweet outro music pumping before we go further off the rails here.
Yes, sir. Let's do it. Thank you, everybody, for listening to yet another very exciting episode of the Friends Talking Fantasy Podcast. If you like what you heard today, if you want to debate which multiverse we're in the Glocta vs. Casca chess match, drop us a line on Twitter over at the FTF Podcast with a number 1 at the end. And we're also on Instagram at the FTF Podcast. And Dylan, if they like what they heard today and they wanted to support the show even further and they just so happen to be listening on Apple Podcasts, what can they do?
Toss 5 stars to our podcast. Just find that Friends Talking Fantasy page on the Apple Podcast app. Click the Friends Talking Fantasy page, scroll down past all those episodes until you start seeing stars. Once you're seeing stars, the optimal number of those to click to support the show would be 5 of them. If you have a little bit of extra time and you want to write a review, that can be even more helpful for a podcast like ours. But just listening is more than enough. Thank you so much for listening to us create these silly matchups between First Law characters. We always have fun talking about this awesome series.
Thank you so much for indulging our First Law shenanigans. We greatly appreciate it. And as always, go forth and conquer, friends.